thank you for joining us in the studio today for quite a different subject. I am your host, Winifred Hanley, and in the studio today we are delighted to have Holly Hamilton. She's going to discuss a little bit about her early childhood and a trip that she took to the Philippine Islands via the Rotary International Group. We are just so pleased to have her in the studio. Welcome, Holly. Well, thank you, Winifred. I'm super excited to be here. Oh yes, well, we're just so pleased to have you. You know, we don't have a lot of time. We originally thought we might have a little bit more, but they've dwindled us down to just 15 minutes. So we do have to get right to it. But before we talk about your trip to the Philippines, we're going to be right back after this message.
Not a lot of good news out there. Bad conditions all over the map. But we hear there's one ray of sunshine. Let's go live.
You can see we're kicking it. Temp 70, humidity 45, air quality 100, mama happy.
Looks like another successful vent heating project.
Welcome back to quite a different subject. Holly Hamilton's in the studio and she's getting ready to share a little bit about her life in the Philippine Islands. But before we get to that, we do want to hear a little bit about her childhood. My childhood, yeah, I would love to share that with you. My grandfather came over on the Britannic. In 1891, he came over from Sweden. The captain of the Britannic, oddly enough, was Edward J. Smith, and he was the captain who went down on the Titanic, sadly. And Ellis Island wasn't open when my family came into New York, so they were processed at the barge office. After my family got here in July of '91, they traveled to Minnesota, where my great-grandmother's sister and her husband were living, and that's where my grandfather ended up spending the majority of his childhood. But I've got a slideshow for you, and it shows a little bit of my childhood, so we can take a look at that. I was born Holly Gay Jardine on November 19, 1963, 3 days before the Kennedy assassination. It was the start of Beatlemania, and the movie to go see was From Russia with Love. I was an only child and started singing and performing on stage at the age of 5. Yes, that's me in the crew cut. My parents separated at the age of 7, and my mother and I moved to Independence, Missouri, the home of my favorite president, Harry S. Truman. I loved my time in the Show Me State, but when my mother remarried, we relocated to Danbury, Connecticut. It was there that I began to expand my horizons, visiting New York City and often dreaming of traveling abroad. There I got my start with the Rotary, and that is where my adventure began. Wasn't that lovely? You were such an adorable child, weren't you? Well, we do want to get a little bit in about what you did while you were in the Philippines, but we have to take another quick break. We'll be right back.
Bill, wake up!
You may be the last to know that you have a sleep disorder. Interrupted breathing at night, sleepy during the day. Let us help with a simple and easy way to find out. Call Central Oregon Sleep Disorder Center for your free in-home oxygen screening test. Don't let another unrestful night go by. Welcome back to quite a different subject. I'm Winifred Hanley, and we're in the studio with Holly Hamilton. Holly was getting ready to share a little bit about what she did while she was in the Philippines. But first, I wanted to ask you a few questions, dear Holly. Living in such a primitive type of surrounding, do tell, how did you manage? Well, Winifred, the Philippine Islands really isn't primitive at all. There are definitely some primitive places. There are places where the natives still live, and there is a lot of poverty there. But there's a lot of cosmopolitan activity. They have a lot of the modern conveniences that we have here. It was really quite nice. I had maids, and I had a driver, and I had cooks and people who made my bed and shined my shoes and pressed my uniform, and so I was really quite spoiled. By the time I came back home, my mother said she couldn't do a thing with me because I had been used to being coddled and served for an entire year. So while you were there, did you get to travel much? Tell me a little bit about what you did traveling. Yeah, we were able to travel quite a bit. There were probably around 12 of us that were in varying parts of the country, and periodically they would get us all together, probably on a quarterly basis, and we would all go take a trip someplace. So we would all get together and got to see the sights and taste the food, and that was probably where we experienced some of the more primitive places where, you know, the outhouses were basically a curtain with a hole dug in the ground, and you washed your hands in a barrel that had everybody else washing their hands in it. Well, I brought a few things that I wanted to share. This is a hat that the natives wore when they were in the rice fields and the rice terraces. I brought a fan. This was essential. You must have a fan everywhere you go because it's hot, very, very hot. It's on the equator. And so I carry, I mean, it's not impolite. You'd sit in church and fan yourself. You'd sit in your classroom. You're in your car, in the back while the driver was driving. And it's just a necessity. Have to have a fan. One of the things that really surprised me was reading through my journal. And it's just been really interesting. This has been the fun part, is reading about the things that I kind of had forgotten. The places I went that I didn't think about, the little details, because I wrote down the details. The boys I had a crush on. There was one guy I had a crush on when we went to visit, I think it was in Cebu, and his name was Tony Toledo. And I always got teased that if I had married him, my name would have been Holly Toledo. When I would walk down the street, I would have Filipino guys yelling out, "Brooke Shield, Brooke Shield!" Brooke Shields. Well, my dear, you certainly don't look anything like Brooke Shields. No. I know, I don't look like Brooke Shields, but I guess all us Americans look the same, and Okay, so let's watch the slideshow.
In June of 1980, I left New York City for the Republic of the Philippines, located in the Pacific Ring of Fire, making it prone to earthquakes and typhoons. It's comprised of 7,107 islands, Luzon being the main island where I stayed. The population is 92 million, making it the 12th largest populated country in the world. President Ferdinand Marcos was in power along with Imelda and her shoes. President Marcos was in office for 21 years and resided at the Malacañang Palace, an equivalent to the White House. Manila is the capital, and it is a beautiful city. I graced the Rotary Bulletin several times during my stay, performing all the customary exchange student duties. This was back when women weren't allowed in the Rotary. So they labeled me the Rotarian Muse. My host families were nice, and at 16 I was attending parties, sitting poolside at the Polo Club, and traveling, often to the mountain resort of Baguio City, where my family had a second home. The road to Baguio was treacherous, but well worth the white knuckles once you arrived. The markets were plentiful, and the people were kind. President Ferdinand and Imelda also had a second home in Baguio City. Back in Makati, I attended Assumption Catholic School for Girls, the finest private school in the country. Former President Gloria Arroyo is part of the alumni. My classmates were the best, and they still are. Here's a picture of them, and I keep in touch with them on Facebook. Needless to say, with my blonde hair and the ability to blend in was non-existent. Note the pictures of Leif Garrett all over my host sister's room, and the girls on the ceiling of my brother's. The beaches were just like what you would expect on a tropical island, clear and blue, filled with lots of things that can eat you. But that didn't stop us, and when the Rotary students got together, the beaches were usually where we hung out. The sunsets were magnificent. Somehow I always found an animal to hold. Oink, oink. The Philippines is an old country, with human remains found dating back 67,000 years. The University of Santo Tomas was founded in 1611. The jeepneys are left over from World War II, and they serve as public transportation, along with the tricycles. We acquired the Philippines from Spain after the Cuban War, paying $20 million US. The country improved under American leadership, but World War II took its toll when Japan invaded Bataan in 1942. But under the leadership of General MacArthur, in 1944 the islands were recaptured at Leyte Beach. He kept his promise of "I shall return." There is a monument on that very spot. The islands gained independence on July 4th, 1946. The Chocolate Hills are a wonder. I met a gardener there who told of a legend of a giant named Orogo, who was extremely powerful and youthful. Orogo fell in love with Aloya, who was a simple mortal. Aloya's death caused Orogo much pain and misery, and in his sorrow he could not stop crying. When his tear dried, the Chocolate Hills were formed. There is much akin to the Philippines, such as traditional dress and food. Pakwan is pumpkin seeds, punkseeds, calamansi, a lemonade drink, adidas, chicken feet, lechon, and balut, fertilized eggs. I can still hear the street vendors calling out, "Balut!"
Oh, that was indeed interesting. We're going to take another break. We will be right back.
I'll be there in 5 minutes.
Okay.
See ya.
Holly Hamilton is joining us in the studio today. She has a couple things that she'd like to share, so do tell me, what have you been up to lately, Holly?
Well, over the years, I have made 4 beautiful children. Jasmine, who lives in Venice Beach, is my oldest and my best friend. My son Julian is at COCC right now going through the nursing program. He's also a musician. My daughter Willow. She'll be heading off to college next year and I'm going to miss her. Isn't she beautiful? And then there's Lily, my 13-year-old precocious little girl who is my constant source of entertainment. I have 2 dogs, Clover, who we rescued from the Humane Society, and little Laverne. I also have a tortoise named Romaine, and our cat, Marge, who we rescued from the family farm in Minnesota. I was in a movie this year. Here's a picture of the director and I. I also met Sam Waterston. I've been painting. I sketch it first on the canvas and then paint it out. I've done a couple of those. Life has really been wonderful.
Well, hasn't this been entertaining? We have enjoyed having Holly in the studio, and we have enjoyed having you with us here today on quite a different subject. Before we go, we have managed to convince Holly to sing the Filipino national anthem. She's a little hesitant. We kind of sprung it on her there at the last moment, but she graciously agreed to sing that, so don't go away. I can't believe you're making me do this. Over the years, I've been singing this song to people saying, "Oh, look how I can sing the national anthem," and I've realized now, looking at the lyrics, that I have been making a mockery of Tagalog. I'm going to be using the words, and I have put up the Filipino flag as a token of my respect for the country. Bayang magilu, pinasagsilangan ang alap ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuya ka ng magiting, samang lalupig, di ka pa sisiil, sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw. May dilag ang tula at awit sa paglaing minamahal, ang kisap ng wataw at mo'y tagumpay, na nagningning, ang bituin at araw niya kailang pa may magdidilim, pang ng araw na pa, luwahati pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang minglagaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo. Well, I don't think I've heard a better rendition of the Filipino national anthem than that one. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever heard the Filipino national anthem, but it is a beautiful song if I could only understand what they're saying. We are so thankful that she was here. We're thankful that you were here. And don't forget to tune in next week. So, until then, Tulu.